my family is from kind of poor working class, and the women grow up in Upper Michigan kind of learning to be very tough. And my mom, in particular, all the way down the matriarchal line, there's kind of a family pattern and tradition of women becoming like men to prove that they are strong and that they have strength and the capacity to be able to withstand trials and hardships. And so they become very hardy. They become very controlling, very emasculated, in the sense that they are searching for purpose and for meaning as a woman from masculine traits, becoming tough and hard, unemotional, almost critical.
And I remember this from a very small age with my different grandmothers. There was my great great grandmother, Carney, um, who was known for things like self abortions or having several boyfriends in a time where that was uncommon. That carried down to her daughter, Melissa, who we called Great Grandma Babe. She was married to my grandpa Jim, and she was very, very demeaning in their relationship. And she was masculine down to her beverage of choice, which was Jim Beams, which she carried with her constantly. Um, and then it also carried down into my own mother, and the way that she raised me in her ideals of what makes a woman very strong.
And growing up, this is how I learned how to be a female. It also, the things that were perceived as weaknesses were things like dressing up, looking like a girl, so wearing skirts, being pretty, wearing any form of makeup was frowned upon, wearing earrings or jewelry, being adorned, anything that makes you look feminine was perceived as a weakness. And this kind of became a part of my super ego, and that it told me that that's how that any form of that was a form of weakness, and so I saw others like that as weak, and I frowned upon them, and I also prevented me from becoming from feeling like in order to be beautiful, I needed to be weak, and so I needed to be hardened and masculine in order to be strong.
Growing up in this environment of gender identity confusion created what I like to call the dirty shoe phase of my life, where everything that was good and embodied my personality in the bright, shiny shoe was hidden behind this dark, dirty, dank exterior, where I started to create an air of undesirability, started to gain a lot of weight. I started to, as time progressed, dress less and less like a girl. I got rid of dresses and skirts. I stopped accessorizing, and I really just became, I guess, what would be considered frumpy. I dressed like a man. I tried to like sports, and all the while, all of these things that I was liking and I was doing seemed like things that were not me. They weren't at the core of me, and I started to form a sort of depression in my life. As I was growing up, I didn't really understand my depression. It was found when my parents got divorced. I started sleeping a lot. I started becoming very distant and having a lot of excessive emotions that I didn't really understand. And so they took me in and they put me on antidepressants, and in this process of going through antidepressants, I realized very quickly that that I knew within myself that I didn't need them. There was a lot within me that felt like I knew what was wrong with me, and like I could kind of overcome it. This is one of my favorite paintings by James Christensen. It's called I See You. And I feel like it really represents the creation of my superego and my ego, protecting my inner self. I feel like the hands represent the ego, which are blocking majority of my true self, which is represented by the face. I feel like the light is representative of the superego, and as I understand it and where it comes from, it sheds light on myself, my true self, which is um, in this photo. It actually appears to represent me pretty well. The eyes look like, to me, there's a lot of sadness, a lot of pain, a lot of repression. The red cheek on the right side of the face represents maybe some shame in that person, as it's been repressed so much by my superego and the way that I should be versus the person that I really am. But there's also a little bit of hope in the eyes, hope in myself that I could actually push through this darkness and this curtain that's been kind of almost given to me, prescribed by an outside figure. I also love that the hands of the ego are so movable and so bendable. They have joints that are flexible and can be changed, but at the same time, they are very human, which in and of itself is flexible and changeable, but also a little bit full of fear and worry, as well as hope to and have acceptance. The biggest part of this self-discovery process, this process to be able to get myself out, has been to really, over the years, discover who I am inside. To discover that person that was hidden deep inside, that had been repressed by so many years of family traditions, and to really, instead of defining myself as the women in my family had defined myself, to define myself as me. I remember growing up, I always felt this excess of emotion. I was a very emotion-filled child, and I always felt all of these things that my family really kind of mocked me for being emotional, and also for being overly caring. I was a very, very nurturing child, and I always have been. I've always been overly concerned with other people, with how people are feeling around me and what they are doing. And as I grew up and kind of hit adolescence and hit the peak of my depression, I eventually realized that these things are not me, that these traits that I had taken on by my family weren't me at all. And so I started to kind of to tap into my inner self, and I don't really have an explanation of how I did it. I really just started surrounding myself with people that shared those same qualities and that encouraged me to be the person that I was. And then it was years after that that I was discovering these little pieces of me, that I was very caring, I was very nurturing. I wasn't cruel or critical or what I like to call sarcastic. I'm actually a very happy, optimistic, positive person, and to corner me and peg me into this category of angry, bitter, um, spiteful women was really a disservice to myself. And as I started to kind of peel back the layers of myself and to look at my superego and where all of these patterns had come from in my life, I peeled them away one by one, and I had to kind of look at each individual aspect and say, is that true for me? Is that true for myself? And either I would have to just toss it completely away and say, no, that's not me, or I could see a little speck of truth, a little particle of myself in it, and I could kind of dust it off and polish it up to become that part of me that it actually really was. And since then, I've been I've been antidepressant free for years. I think so many times the process of breaking through our superego is frightening. It's been something that's been there our whole lives, something that has guided us and led us to the point that we're at, and it's the only thing that we know. And the protective layer of our ego that has been formed really discourages us from doing that because it's unsafe, and it leads us into scary territory. But the reality is that there's an us that exists beneath all of that, someone uh, who is screaming to get out, someone who we identify with and that we find within the small fragments of our everyday life. And if we really take that opportunity to just break it down to work through the different phases of our lives, we really find someone that we are proud of, someone that we're happy to spend the rest of our lives being, someone that is comfortable in their own skin, who is ready to take on the world.